Good morning. This is a quick video, a really short video. Just wanted to show something that I've been doing over the last day or so. The whole issue of finishing necks and bodies in different finishes is a long and extensive one, and I'm not by any means an expert. I found it very difficult to figure out what to do when I started to want to do small either repairs or particularly wanted to refret things and make necks look as good as new again. And so around about that time I started researching what possibilities there were, and you quickly find out that they're endless and also quite confusing in terms of the various different possibilities are confusing, and then you've got all the different views on it which can be more or less informed, which also gets doubly confusing. So what I ended up doing was finding a couple of workable alternatives for me, and I really have two directions I go in when it comes to finishing for, let's say, an upcycled neck, which is something like this old Antoria, which I'm refretting, but it happened to be the way they fretted it previously. They fretted it and then sprayed their poly on top, and it made a very thick brittle layer on top of the frets. So to remove the frets, you've got no choice but to damage all the poly layer on top. So if you want to refret it, you have to also refinish not only the fingerboard but also the edges, because they crack out and big chunks come out of that. So to make it even feel decent, you've got to refinish it. So for me, the main pressure was upcycling necks, because I do a lot of that for making headless guitars like this, and I want to be able to, or I wanted to be able to find a way to just make a neck that had a good solid protective finish on it but felt good too. And I think I began probably by using Nitrocellulose, which is actually easy to use out of a can. It dries fairly quickly, or sets fairly quickly, but it's stinky, it's environmentally unsound, and you have to kind of pick your times. You can't do it in certain humidity, and you can't do it in enclosed spaces without breathing stuff. And then if you live in an area with other people in it, you also have to consider your neighbours, and great clouds of stinking solvent blowing around in the air. So it's not a very good choice. Occasionally I'll do it to finish a guitar body, and I'll leave it till late at night when everyone's indoors asleep, and I'll heat up the shed and get the temperature and the humidity as close as I can get it. So that's what I used first, and that was fairly effective, except for very humidity sensitive, and you'd get blooming, which is a kind of a white cloudiness set in into the lacquer if you did it with the humidity too high. And it was very difficult in the UK anyway. It's very difficult to get the humidity down to the right levels. So it's quite humidity sensitive, stinky, and really restricted in terms of the times you could do it. And it's very expensive as well, about £15 plus postage for a 400ml tin, which can be gone, particularly if you think about it, the slightest puff of wind and it's going everywhere but the piece you're trying to do. So it's not a great means altogether. I hadn't got into the other sensible option for spraying, which is to use a compressor and a spray gun, and then either a solvent-based paint or lacquer or a water-based one. A spray gun kit and a compressor with a water-based solvent is probably a really good way to go, because it's much cheaper in many respects and it's environmentally more friendlier. But I haven't got down that road yet, and I might go down that road at some point. But after struggling with nitro for a while, it seemed expensive for what I was trying to do with necks. And of course the other thing I wanted to do with necks is to be able to fit a custom decal. Now obviously this has got no headstock, but typically that would go on the headstock. And I've got a good supply of nice metallic foil decals for various things I need to do, and I wanted a lacquer or a finish that was easy to put over that. And nitro is good for that, but as I say, it had all those kind of convenience problems. So what I discovered after trying a couple of different things was this stuff, and I can't remember, after a bit of research I found it online, and it's a US based product, and there are others out there that you can buy, I'm absolutely sure, and there are many people say you can make your own by using various water-based, no, do they say water-based? See, this is where I get confused. Various other poly finishes that you can mix with mineral spirits to thin down to make a rubbing version. So this is Minwax's one. It's a wipe-on poly, so it's fairly thin and wipes on and dries pretty quickly, and it's water. Is this one? Yeah, this is water-based. Yeah, water-based. That's what I like about this, water-based. And what's great about the water-based one is that you can add stain, water-based stains. This is an amber stain, which is great for making that colour, sort of vintagey colour, if you're careful with it. And you can mix the two things together in a little pot. Now I've dropped in a few drops of stain here. I've built up some layers already on this one, and I'm just going to literally get me a little bit of cloth, and I'm just adding a bit more colour to this before I call the job done. So I can, it's described as a wipe-on poly, but it's incredibly forgiving in the sense that you can wipe it on, you could pour it on if you wanted to, or you could brush it on. It's entirely your choice. But I tend to do it with a soft cloth like this and get a nice coverage. And if you do it in a well lit place, you can always check the kind of surface finish. And then the nice thing about this stuff is that not only is it good for going over the side area, which I had to repair on this neck as well, because removal of the frets cracked out chunks of shards of the brittle finish. So it also has to go down the side, and in going down the side, of course, it has to blend in with the existing. You need to blend it in with the existing finish, unless you want to strip the whole thing back. Now I don't want to strip the whole thing back because there was a fine layer of perfectly workable poly on the back of this neck. The original stuff, it happens to be, or they finished it to a gloss. Now this is a gloss poly that I'm using. You can get another, well, any manufacturer I guess makes, but Minwax makes another one which is a satin finish, which I prefer, but I couldn't get it this time around for love nor money. So I use whatever I can get, and in this case I managed to find a supplier in the US and bought 4 of these in one go for actually a very reasonable cost considering the individual price when you buy it from overseas. So the thing about doing this, I'm keeping this short, but the thing about doing this is it's nice and tactile. You can do it indoors, you can do it in between doing other things, go and play guitar, watch TV or something, and then come back to it. And it only takes 5 minutes to 10 minutes or so for this layer to dry. The interesting thing about doing this, if you're doing a refret, is you do need to pay a bit of attention to cleaning out the slots. And I've just done the thing again that I tried not to do, which is I've held onto the piece that I've just covered for about the 1000th time. Don't hold that bit, it's so tempting. So you have to periodically clean out the slots. Now you don't have to get it completely cleaned out, you just need it clear enough to be able to get the fret slot saw in a bit later on. I learned this the hard way. When you do a refinish of a neck like this, it's very tempting to put the frets in first onto bare wood and spray or apply, usually spray over the top. And actually that's how many manufacturers do it and did it in the olden days, including the manufacturer who, I guess it was Ibanez, I think, who made this Antoria model back in the 70s. And one of the reasons why the frets were so hard to get out is that they sprayed a very thick layer of poly directly over the freshly laid frets. And as a result, the frets then sit under this carpet of brittle, crispy substance, which is a really nice finish, but it gives the whole thing a gloopy look, because right at the edges it kind of undulates over the edge of the frets. Whereas I'd much prefer, this is the danger too, you get little bits of gum sticking up. I would much prefer to be able to put the frets down first and then spray, sorry, put the lacquer down first, or the poly, and then add the frets on top of that. Now that's entirely possible to do, but you have to be prepared to do this, which is to, as I say, periodically clean out the slots just so they don't completely gum up. Now as long as I put a little bit of time into cleaning those slots out, at the end of this, which we're close to the end of it now, I'll be able to just let the poly set a little bit more, and then I can take it out to the shed and get the slot saw on it, and just re-clean out those slots. And that's one of the most critical things in refretting, is to clean out the slots so that the new frets are able to sit perfectly flat on the fretboard. Otherwise you'll get microscopic unevenness. So an example of one that I've done the surface first and then fretted on top of is this one. So it's not perfect because I've made sure, I mean I wanted it to retain some of its old character, but what I've done here is I've laid on the water-based poly first, and then I've wire-wooled it, or I've cleaned out the slots, wire-wooled it flat, cleaned out the slots finally, preparatory to laying these beautiful gold Evo frets in. Now it isn't perfect because there's some little marks where I've taken the spilled glue out the way, and actually what I could do with this, if I wanted to, is just add another layer of nitro over the top. And nitro and water-based, they work okay together that way round. So it's, you know, I could do that if I wanted to, but I actually quite like the sort of silky, not brand new look of this. It's not trying to look like a you know, a showroom factory guitar. So this is another example of one that's in progress, and same as that previous one. Two guitars pretty much the same on the production line. And this is an example of the stage where I've cut and positioned the frets, and it's also over a cleaned up fingerboard. Now I don't think I re-polyed this one, but I did need to obviously poly on the back where I've put on the decal and so on, and then just make sure the edges are good too. So it's about getting a nice finish that you can handle, and you'll know it will play well. But what I'll probably want to do on both of these, not this one, this is done, sorry, these two here, is when I've laid the frets, so I want to get the base right first, sand it back so it's nice and smooth, possibly even wire wool it, put the frets in, clean up any glue spills, and then what I'd probably do then is go over the edges with this rub-on poly, same kind of stuff, tinted, just to blend in with here and seal in the fret ends, which actually looks very nice as well. So it's not for the sake of recommending a product. If you can make your own, that's great. Definitely worth investigating how to make your own. Lots of different views on that. It's not exactly rocket science. I just bought this for convenience. But the process of water-based poly is really good because you can do it indoors at your own pace, and it just really, it blends in. If you're careful, it blends in really well with the existing things. It's also quite good for repairing. You can tint, you know, if you have some stains, water-based stains, you can really tint any colour you like. It can be quite extremes. You can build up a you know, emerald green finish if you want. But you can tint for repairs. So say for example you had to rub back to wood to take out some sort of repair area, you can effectively paint a pretty good repair finish. It isn't perfect. You can never get gradients blended perfectly, so it will, if you really do have to strip back to wood on an already tinted neck, you really do need to take the whole thing back and then do the colour like this in one, you know, in one sort of operation, so you get a continuous, universal or uniform colour. But it is, you know, if you're not too bothered, it is pretty good for repairing as well. So there you go. That's just a quick on how I use waterborne poly. I think occasionally I still will use There are certain times I'll use nitro with a brush. Certain things, nitro can build up very quickly. So if you've just got like a screw hole that you have to fill, then a little blob of nitro of the right colour is a quick way of fixing it, whereas you have to build up a bit longer with this. If you chucked on a blob, same equivalent size blob of waterborne, it seems to stay softer longer. But once it's built up, I'll show you, it makes a fantastic finish. This is a much earlier one I did, and I left it sort of, I suppose it's satiny, but I wasn't too bothered. I wasn't too careful in the colour here, so I laid on the amber a bit thick. But this guitar has been well played, and it still feels an absolutely gorgeous finish to play with. You know, there's nothing about that which is any less, or you know, isn't as good as any professional finish. So the finish, the professionalism really comes down to the way you sand it back, smooth it out, and then the way you either buff it up to a nice shine, or you take it to a silky satin feel. I bought a proper buffer wheel a couple of years ago, so if I wanted to, I could take all of these, I could make all of these glossy shine prior to fretting. But it's not quite the look I'm after. But you know, it's amazing how quickly you can run a neck over the buffer and this would come out brilliant gloss. Same with these. It's also handy to have that because I can repolish these very quickly too. So something that's got a little bit tired over the years can be brought up to a shine. Anyway, there you go. Tabletop poly made easy.